Today I speak with Scott De Silva, the current Auckland Council Manager of Regional Parks and an Operations Controller in Auckland Emergency Management when Cyclone Gabrielle hit. Scott has worked in Muriwai and has been part of the community for many years, and he lives nearby in Cable Road. Scott talks about what Auckland Council was expecting and preparations taken before the weather event.
But again, we weren't probably ever prepared for what actually happened out at Muriwai with the degree of devastation that actually happened out there. A lot of people were after answers, and Council wasn't really prepared for the degree of information that they needed to provide.
He explains his role in the recovery and restoration of Muriwai, the first community meeting in Muriwai, managing communications, and some of the frustrations he experienced. We explore the Muriwai cordons process and opinions of the cordons within the community and beyond.
We had no process for cordons. We had no previous history of establishing cordons in Auckland that I was aware of. But look, I'll be honest, there were some mixed views on that stuff as well.
We talk about the impacts of the cordons on local commercial businesses and the security systems adopted. Scott shares the challenges he experienced at this time, the learnings.
It feels like it's one of those things that's not going to go away, and I think the more prepared Auckland Council can be, the better.
The changes and developments in emergency management in Auckland Council and regional parks that have been undertaken, and advice he has for other communities preparing for or impacted by a weather event.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. Scott De Silva, my current role is Manager of Regional Parks, and actually that was the role that I actually was performing before Gabrielle hit us. I look after 28 regional parks across the region, Muriwai being one of those, but also a local to Muriwai. And I've been with Council for over 20 years and in the parks business for most of that time, so I'm pretty familiar with the operations component of that. In terms of Gabrielle, I was performing probably two different roles. I had already done some work with Auckland Emergency Management prior to Gabrielle hitting, and I was actually involved in that through the COVID response. When Cyclone Gabrielle actually hit, I was actually on the sort of 3 deep list. They have 3 of us on there, and I was scheduled to be in the Emergency Control Centre on the night that Gabrielle was coming through. I started my shift at 7 o'clock, and so I left my wife and our little dog at home by themselves, which is, in hindsight, was a little bit scary given what actually came across. And we're only up on Cable Road, so not too far from Muriwai. And so went into the ECC, as they call it, and I was managing the operations function at that time. So operations deal with a whole bunch of different things, getting stuff done kind of component, and really close interaction with FENZ, New Zealand Police, emergency services. So that was my role. I went for 12 hours. We did 12-hour shifts, and as you know, the impacts of the cyclone and what was actually happening on that west coast was pretty close to my heart, and it was a real struggle that night to actually sort of see the night through. Anyway, I was pretty emotionally and physically sort of whacked at the end of that.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, it's so difficult for you to be kind of trying to work in that role, but being so much a part of it yourself personally.
Oh yeah, it was really, really tricky. And we could hear all the events going off. We could hear the communication with the community, evacuations from the surf club at the time. And so it was one of those nights where you'll never really forget. And I was still bang into people in Auckland Council and even in the community, and you sort of look at each other and you know what you sort of went through. You got this there's this kind of a thing there, whether it's good or bad, it's a thing. So
yeah, it's a connection, and it's a mutual knowing in a way. Yeah. What were you actually expecting as a team?
Well, it's funny. I was making my way in as I guess the wind started to pick up type approach, and so it was getting to that point where it's like I had to go and because I know it was going to get worse. The council had been tracking that for a while, that cyclone and that weather system. So, and there were notifications out about that. No one kind of really understood the impact of the cyclone sort of coming down the east coast and their tail flicking around to the west coast. And it was a real surprise that I don't think anyone who really anticipated the way it actually hit us. So it was a real learning for everyone. And like I said, once it started, Muriwai went down first, and then Piha, then Karikari, and its way down. So it was sort of almost a domino effect with the impacts that were sort of moving down that west coasting area.
Mm. And after the events 2 weeks before, with all that rain and lots of flooding in the area, was Auckland Council starting to think about that and about the sort of extra water and the potential landslides? Was that ever a thing that people had in their minds?
Well, I don't look. I was aware of the previous landslides that had happened in the 60s, and although that never came into my mind at the time, given the previous rainfall and the way it hit us. So, and I guess it was probably just a number of factors that really sort of just added on top of each other that actually contributed to what Muriwai experienced. So, wind direction, the power of the wind, the rain, everything else that went with it, and look, I don't think anyone probably anticipated what was going to happen in that area and the impacts on those on that community. So yeah, we kind of went in thinking, okay, we knew we'd had the previous weather event. We knew there was a lot of people out there concerned about more rain. We did have a program there, and actually going through this exercise makes me think about all that stuff now. We did have an exercise around sandbagging. I know areas in South Auckland were really preparing up for sandbagging, and there was probably other areas as well. So there was deliveries of sand and bags and that sort of thing leading up to the event, and pretty much into that evening before it really hit us. So, but again, yeah, we weren't probably ever prepared for what actually happened out at Muriwai with the degree of devastation that actually happened out there.
Mm. And so, as your role is sort of managing the regional parks and this regional park in Muriwai, did that just kind of fall under your job description that, if there's an event coming to this area where there is a park, then you become part of the operations?
No, not at all. I know after the event had happened, and we actually had a meeting at the surf golf club. We had a big community meeting there, and it was a couple of days afterwards. Might even been the next day, I can't remember. And I know I got a phone call from one of our colleagues in the comms team and says, we want someone to, I guess, present something to the community. Although we had a number of other people there, they said, look, you're a local, your face is probably more familiar than others, so would you mind doing it? And I said, no, that's fine. And it was pretty nerve-wracking. It's 800 odd people or something, which was kind of nuts. So I did that from, being sort of asked to move into that and did that piece. Following that, they actually had a number of staff go into Muriwai to assist with the recovery and sort of community engagement roles. But I think what happened is there was a bit of a turnover of staff and they never really got the momentum going. So I kind of got wind of it through other staff, and I was sort of keeping a close eye on it because I was interested because I knew the impacts. And at one point I just spoke to my manager and said, look, I think I'd be the right person to go in there and try to assist with some of the recovery work. So I kind of put my hand up and it was agreed, yeah, it would be good to get you in there. So I was really fortunate. I came out of my home role I think I was out of it for about 8 or 9 months. Went back into it just slowly before Christmas. So, but I think having that connection with the place, and what I wanted to do is to really enable people to get the answers that they wanted, because I think at the time a lot of people were after answers, and council wasn't really prepared for the degree of information that they needed to provide. I wasn't able to answer everything. I'm not trying to admit I'm some sort of martyr, because I'm not. But I thought, well, at least I can try to manage some of those questions. And yeah, it was a nice piece of work that I did with another colleague, Ruth Bunny, who actually came on. She really worked really tiresome on that work as well. So it was really great to have her alongside me, and I think we made a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, I think, was very helpful for the community to know you, and as the sort of what we saw you as like the local ranger who would kind of see around
Mhm.
the place, and that I think that was very important because everyone was feeling so sort of fragile to have someone that they actually knew to be speaking to them about these things. So what, from the beginning, from that night, what what did you end up doing? What became your job?
Um, so, but what I guess, where I saw the hole in terms of what we could do was one, communications. So I was really focused. When I remember getting Ruth on for the first day, and I said, okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to respond to everyone who approaches us. So we're going to capture the information and we're going to make sure we go back to them. And I think we did that most of the time. So that was our goal. Um, there were some key pieces of work that we had to implement. The cordons were um, pretty much established with guards on the road, stopping anyone going down there. We had no process for cordons. We had no um, previous history of establishing cordons in Auckland that I was aware of. I was working closely with the AEM team, and we did approach Christchurch around the earthquakes to say, what did you guys do? How did you manage this stuff? So we got a bit of information from them, but we kind of developed our own process. And I think if you recall back, it was we ended up putting barriers up there. We ended up having guards up there. We ended up with a process of saying, who should we let in? Do we just let residents in? Um, and what about their families? So families who live outside the area. So there was all these decisions that we had to make to try to make this thing work. We ended up putting those horrible A4 placardy things on people's windscreens because we had nothing else. But then I also recall the community, there's a community group who were established who were passing out stickers at one stage. It's like, okay, you can use a sticker. And the guards were getting like, is it a placard? Is it a sticker? What are we doing? They're not letting people in. So I said, okay, we need to tidy this stuff up. So we developed a bit of a process around that. And I think, look, it took us a little bit of time, but we got a swing of things and we were issuing passes out to people with multiple vehicles and that sort of thing. So it became a little bit loose, but it actually kind of worked. And I think the concerns from the community around looting, around damage to their properties and their security aspects, I think the cordons, I think, were really well received. Um, but look, I'll be honest, there were some mixed views on that stuff as well. We were getting challenges from people. I want my family to come in. They're in West Auckland. They should be able to come in here. And we're like, hold on a minute. Where do we start and stop with this? And we need to. So there were some hard decisions, and some people weren't happy with that. But I think we got support from the majority, which is good.
Mm.
Um,
And for people who don't know Muriwai, basically there's two roads that you can come down to get into the community of Muriwai mostly.
yeah.
So it was an area geographically that could be kind of cordoned, but I guess not every community would be like that.
No, no, no. I'd hate to think how they managed Christchurch. It would just be horrible. And that, look, we put a lot of resources and money into those cordons. They were there for a long, long time. So
How
I,
long were
I know
they
that.
there for, Scott?
Oh, geez, I
Six
can't even
months?
remember now. I can't. Yeah, it would have been. I think the last one on Waitea was 6 months, wasn't it? So we had those in, and just thinking at the top of Motatala Road by the top shop there, that road was closed. We had material right across it. You couldn't actually go through that road. So part of the work we were trying to do was everything had to come through Waitea, which created a bit of bottleneck, and there's a lot of traffic and congestion and whatever else on there. Um, and we had heavy vehicles on there as well, obviously, because they were doing work in the park. So there were some concerns around that. So stability wise. Um, but then trying to get the Motatala Road section open as well was tricky. And so part of my job was to actually work my way through that with contractors. We obviously had a number of houses impacted there, and we obviously hit the site where we lost our friends. So that was sort of had the emotional tie to it. But we worked through that, and that was reasonably good. And I think by the time we got to opening up the cordons, it was sort of getting to the point where we had to actually open things up a little bit more. And again, there was parts of the community that were saying, "Hey, we need to move on and let's get stuff going." And there was other parts that were saying, "Hey, we've still got work to do." Domain Crescent was still heavily impacted, as we know, and they had issues, quite a number of issues up there we still had to address. And the other factor, which when we put the cordons in, which I never really thought about, was the impact on those commercial, businesses. So the golf club, horse riders, campground, surf school, cafe. All of them had demands, and they were trying to manage things as best they can by supporting the community, but also saying, hey, if we don't actually start to get some revenue, we're going to go under. So how do we actually do that? So we had to establish a bit of a process for that as well, which was took a little bit of time, but we got there, and I think most people at the end of it were pretty comfortable with where we got to.
So can you tell us about some of those systems that you implemented?
Well, some of it was just really looking at how do we actually enable people to come through a cordon, which is closed for only residents, and the security around that. So the golf club was saying, oh, we could do a package deal for people where they could come in, and I was saying, like, hey, when are they going to get there? We needed the names of all the people who were coming through there. The golf club had to physically go up there and either transport them in or show them down to the golf club. They were specified not to go anywhere bar the golf club. So, and very similar to the horse riders as well, they had to do that. But it was only as much as it wasn't I guess there was no opportunity for walk-ins as such. So everything had to be planned out and approved by, wasn't so much approved by us, but we were keeping a fairly close eye on the process and making sure that anyone who come in we had a sort of a registration for them. So look, it was tricky, but it actually worked out, and we managed to keep those businesses going to as much as we could. Cafe was probably the more tricky one because they were really reliant on that summer numbers coming through and supporting them. So and we weren't able to support that. There was only community support that could actually do that. So they really struggled in that space, and I know that they went through their own struggles and through the people who were there at the time. And I'm trying to recall, my memory fades me on the campground, but I think that was very similar because we just didn't want people coming in with camper vans who were just going to hang out and do what, while everyone else is able to stay out of the park. So, so I'm pretty sure we really heavily restricted those access points.
Were you actually doing the cordons purely to stop looting, or were there some other reasons why you felt that was necessary?
I think there was a safety aspect to it. From what we got from the community was, one, security of property, especially houses that had been significantly damaged and when no one was occupying them. And we had a lot of red stickered properties, as you know. There was also still safety concerns around some of that. So people going and sort of going for a drive up to Main Crescent just to have a gander and have a look. So I think it was a pretty big call to stop everyone coming in there, and we got a lot of pressure from outside of the park. People QMU going, hey, we're residents, we're locals, why can't we go there?
It's our beach.
It's our beach, yeah. And we're like, well, no, you can't. So we stuck to our guns on it, but we were pretty focused on what do we actually need to do to lift these once they're in place. So at what point can we actually allow access? And just making sure that things were safe and secure for people. So,
Mm. What challenges and frustrations did you experience over that time?
I always took the approach that people down at Muriwai and some of those other areas impacted were really, really struggling with a whole bunch of stuff that I wasn't having to experience. So, either a loss of life or a loss of property, houses being stickered, you can't go back in there. And so I always put that lens over things when I was dealing with people because I knew that they were in a pretty hard place. Saying that, there was people who gave us a bit of a hard time at times, and we just had to either just shrug that off and move on. But I think most people were pretty respectful of the work we were trying to do at the time. They could sort of see that, I hope, and we were working for the best for everyone. So, there was other things just around some of that. I had a degree of frustration at times when I could sort of see work that needed to be done, and whether it's on the drains on the Main Crescent, they were filling up with silt, and then they were causing issues to other properties that weren't impacted, and there was trying to work with other parts of council. They were dealing with a whole range of different things, so maybe it wasn't a full priority for them. I probably didn't understand at the time the degree of the impacts right across Auckland. Muriwai being only just one site, and we had huge amount of other properties right across the country or across Auckland that were impacted as well. So, you know, the team who were working in the recovery office at the time were really, really stretched. They were having to try to manage as much as they can, and they're trying to do the best job they could. So tricky time.
It was a tricky time, and as you said earlier, it's unprecedented. So it wasn't
Yep.
as if Auckland Council had systems in place for this kind of massive
No,
weather event.
no.
What do you think Auckland Council has learned, and what things are being done to kind of you know prepare them better for another weather event?
I've seen a huge change in emergency management in Auckland. They've really, I guess, the Bush report. For those who read the Bush report on the review, I think it was pretty hard hitting, and I didn't typically agree with it. But that's just me. Um, they put a huge amount of resources and training into their teams up there, including myself. I'm still part of the team there, so um, we catch her up regularly. We run scenarios. Some of the learnings I've had at Muriwai around cordons, I've written up a bit of a cordon review plan. So, and I've submitted that to the guys in AEM to say, look, this is something that probably needs to be probably worked on a little bit more, but has a bit of a blueprint for something if it ever happened again. Um, looking at even just the number of events we've had since Gabrielle have been huge. Even just a week or so ago, we had those impacts down the East Coast. So it feels like it's one of those things that's not going to go away. And I think the more prepared Auckland Council can be, the better. So the team up there is, yeah, they pretty much changed their structure. The general manager, I think, is a great guy who's really prepared to invest in his team, which is it's going to be great for everyone. Good to know that a lot more people are aware of these things as well. So I'm sure there's no one hiding under a rock who's not aware of this stuff. So
Yeah. And I feel like, with these other weather events, we are becoming more educated, looking slightly differently at things like water rushing out of a bank.
mm,
In the past we would have just thought flooding.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
we are all getting a bit of a different lens on all of that, I think. Is there something that you wish the decision makers and the wider public understood better?
Having good people who can go into some of those communities at a time to try to work through that I think, is a really good lesson. It really, I think it really paid off. Um, so I think that's one of the things. If we were going to have another event, I think it would be good to have a look at how we're going to resource this. And look, if you don't understand Auckland Emergency Management and Auckland Council works, most of the team, they've got a reasonably, I'm only guessing, let's say it's 20 people, right? I don't know how much more or less they may be of that. But when an incident happens, they actually bring in a whole bunch of council staff to do stuff. So we used to have three deep list, would be the operations manager plus myself plus Reg Phillips was in there. And now they've got 10 deep lists. So they bring in staff from all over the place to actually manage these things. So I think, you got some really experienced people, and then you've got some other people who it's not their day job and they're going to try to work around as much as they can with the training that they get. So I think it's something just for people to be conscious of. Um, Saying that, I think when a community goes through those impacts like they have, it's really hard to think about that stuff, and council should be there to support us, and you should be just doing your job. And yep, I kind of get that to a degree as well. I guess from the community perspective, I don't want to poke sticks at the community because I think they did an amazing job. I think the way that the team came together at Muriwai, I can't recall the name of the group, the committee they established, and for the life of me, but Mike Hibbard was in there leading it when I sort of stepped in, and I think he'd taken over from
Mm,
someone else.
the red
They were
stickered group.
the Red Stickered group, that's it. They were actually amazing. They were absolutely amazing, and a really great bunch of people who were so committed to what actually the recovery at Muriwai. And I don't think, despite everything council did, I don't think you would ever get that traction if you didn't have those great people leading that. They were really good to bounce things off. I work with them, numerous meetings that we actually had around cordons and road closures and sticker groups and that sort of thing. So It was actually quite incredible, I think, the way they come together. They were so well organised. And I think probably more so than some of the other communities that have been impacted. And I do feel for the poor people in Henderson and Swanson and, Ranui and stuff like that, who probably didn't have the mechanisms or the connections there to do a similar thing because um, yeah, maybe they just didn't. But I think that group were absolutely amazing, and they made my job a lot easier as well, trying to get stuff through because I could explain from a council's perspective, hey, we actually need to do this, and then they would send it out through their channels and WhatsApp groups and this and that,
Yeah.
and that was pretty cool. So everyone kind of knew, and they were the part to, okay, you guys deal with the community communication. We don't have to, and here's the messaging we want to send out, and you guys distribute it. So a few little things fell through the cracks at times, but most of it was pretty good.
That's so good, isn't it? And it's almost like a conduit between the council and the rest of the community.
Yeah,
And yeah, probably some things would be better received coming from those guys than, people
yeah,
that the community doesn't know from council.
yeah,
Yeah. So do you feel like, communities and them sort of thinking about what they can do to prepare for this kind of thing? Is it something that they can actually plan ahead of time and sort of figure out before an event? I mean, or is it's really just the kind of stuff that quickly gets formed, in the heat of the moment, but then that depends on who's actually in the community, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. It does. Like I've often thought about, could you establish those communication groups? But if you've got nothing to send out or provide updates on, then does that kind of work? And would people take notice of it? But I guess, like, I still think there's a role there for the community. I don't think you can rely on councils or government to do everything. So I think if you're ever in that situation again, I would definitely encourage any community groups to have a think about a working group that you can work with the agencies on and at least be the voice of the community because otherwise you're hearing a lot of stuff and I think you can definitely streamline um, some of the processes or some of the communication and just make things easy for everyone.
Mm. So you've been through this stuff and you've, flying by the seat of your pants at the time, probably a little bit. And
Mm.
do you feel like now, if it happened again, say in Muriwai, we had a similar weather event, do you feel like you're prepared or do you feel like Auckland Council is more prepared?
Yeah, I'm definitely more prepared. I haven't written a plan, but I know that, and that just comes with probably experience of being involved in it. But the stuff that we've talked about. But when you rang me, Mandy, to do this thing, it kind of I started to think about things, and it's like I'd put them in the back of my head, and they all came flowing forward. And I'm like, geez, okay, that's right. But I think we've got some process now set up around some of those things, whether it be cordons or road clearances or remove of homes, that sort of thing, which I think we could probably do better on. And um, personally, myself, I think if I was in that situation again, I'd probably have things going a lot quicker. I may not do it better, but definitely a lot quicker and move things along rather than sort of this hesitance of, oh shit, is this the right thing to do? We haven't done this before and we've got no guidebook. God, look, I think councils continually, as I said before, they're continually preparing themselves for what the future holds. And I think the more scenario planning they can do, the more processes they set up, the more training they can give staff, then I think that's all good stuff. And some of it is going to be, oh shit, this is coming our way, and what we don't quite know what's going to happen and where it's going to impact. Um, One of the cool things that's actually just recently happened is in my team, I've got about 110 staff. So rangers scattered across wherever, across the region pretty much. And we've just done some recent training. I've wanted to put all of them through a basic, what they call a foundation course for emergency management. So I've got three-quarters, 2/3 of them done, and I've got another third to go through. The plan is the next level up will actually do an intermediate level, and then the next level up, which is my level and my lead team and my direct reports, will actually do a Sims 4 and get involved in emergency management. So I think from a regional parks perspective, that's what I can do for my team. I've just taken the initiative My guys are great eyes and ears out on there in the communities because they're scattered far and wide, and that's a lot of the information we actually require through a response or an event. Like what happened in Muriwai was actually getting good intel. What the hell is actually going on out there? And I know that in the ECC that night, we were getting people calling in, and we were getting police communication, we're getting Fens communication, and then the army was doing some stuff, and Surf Club was actually in there, and it was just a lot of like all information overload. It's like, okay, what are we actually working with here? So there's some, I think communication at that stage is really important. And like I said, I've got my team sort of on that. They're not going to go and respond to stuff like we would in those incidents, but eyes and ears feeding intel back into the emergency centre is actually really, really important stuff to actually build a case to understand what the issue is so we can deploy resources.
And I feel like I said before, that the connection that rangers or people working in the regional parks have with their communities is something to be
Yeah,
used, in a positive way. I think
yeah.
they're great people to be actually, on the ground talking and working with people.
Oh, they're totally invested in their communities. Like Phil out at Muriwai, I've met some guys up north today. I went for a meeting up in the northern team, and just guys who have been living and working in those communities they just have a real connection to it, and they want to look after the community. So you're right. Those guys are key.
In your role as, with the regional parks, is there a way of communicating your learning within the Auckland Council to other councils and across New Zealand?
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, I haven't I haven't initiated that, and I probably should do that. Um, and I probably need to speak to my AEM, family on the other side there and just have a chat to them about how we would do that. I know that there is within that team there is a lot of cross sort of pollination and sharing of information, but in terms of what I went through and the learnings that I had, like I said, I passed on information to them. I probably haven't been as proactive as I could have with making sure that they've followed up and picked that up, and there's a process that's really tidy now that follows that. But yeah, that's something for me to make sure I do.
Yeah, I feel like it would be a good thing to do, just, so that what we've learned can
Yep.
sort of help other communities to prepare or to sort of manage a really difficult event.
Those other systems that are coming through, which seem really regular, it's just kind of like, well, sheesh, you're going back into this again. What is that going to bring to us? So I know that sort of long-term impacts can really affect and hurt people.
And how did this event and the work that you did, how did that actually affect you personally?
Well, I sort of talked earlier about me being in the control centre on that night. Like I said, I got down to the car park. I was in the Civic car park. Got down there I finished my shift at around 7, I think it was, and I left the office about 7:30, and I couldn't drive home straight away. I had to sit there and um, just take a bit of time. I just found it so hugely draining. It was really, really tricky. I got a lot of joy from really helping people, and I do that, and I like that. Um, I think the work that I went into Muriwai, I was really quite blessed that I was actually able to do that, and I had support from council to enable that because I knew I could do some really good. And that was always the intention, is just try to keep things ticking along and help people where we can, because I think sometimes you get into this big machine and you kind of you're moving so quickly that you kind of just don't have the time to do that. But I think by the time I probably left, I probably had done my dash. I was pretty tired at the end of it, and it had been a really long road. But look, I met some amazing people down there that I hadn't actually met prior to the event, and some people I still see knocking around, and I get a hug occasionally, and and it's really nice. And like I said, I think it's one of those things where you've been through that, then it'll always be there.
And is there
Totally.
something hopeful or meaningful that you'd like to leave us with?
I think it's just an amazing place. It's an amazing community. I look at it. I've probably changed my views. I always looked at it as the regional park. It's not the regional park. It's the wider community that really makes that place. And I just take my hat off to all the residents down there who managed to work their way through that, and thank them all for it.
Yeah.
Oh, one final thing. I remember saying to someone, I wasn't a local or something. And they said, you're a local. It really made me feel good. I don't live in the community itself. I live up on, like I said, on Cable Road, so I'm a wee way away, but it was really nice. And I think that might have been Claire, actually. So she was always trying to make me feel good. But hearing those words were just like, yeah, I am a local.
Precipice was commissioned and funded by Muriwai Community Association, supported by the Auckland Council Recovery Office. Artwork by Taylor Williams, soundtrack by local Muriwai band Tin People, written in response to Cyclone Gabrielle. Ngā mihi, thank you to the Muriwai community for their input and bravery and for sharing their stories. And thank you for listening.